Hello everyone and welcome to the very first ever Right Hook results show. The day has finally arrived and we are giving the results for the inaugural Joker tournament that started back in December. Now we have a lot of riders waiting to get the results, so we'll get right to it. So there were 4 brackets for this competition. They were named after famous dead authors, so we have the Gertrude Stein bracket, we have the James Joyce bracket, we have the Mary Shelley bracket, and we have the Charles Dickens bracket. Now, over in the Gertrude Stein bracket, there were up to 7 people who did not finish their submission despite entering, meaning that only 5 people are competing for a €100 prize in the Gertrude Stein division. There are 3 stories there that go straight into the semi-final, and there is only one quarter-final match with Would You Love Me If I Was A versus Eliza apologizes for the lack of plot, but she's not a very good writer yet. Charles Dickens had 7 writers finish an entry, which means that they only have one story advance straight to the semi-finals, which is Follicle Factory. Everyone else must battle it out in the quarter-finals to see who joins Follicle Factory in the semi-final. All of Mary Shelley skipped the first round, but there's a full bracket of 8, so there is a full quarter-final round in the Mary Shelley bracket. James Joyce is the only bracket with first-round matches, with 4 unlucky riders having to go the full gauntlet if they want to win. The rest advance and wait for them in the quarterfinals. So let's start there. Our first match in that bracket pitted Bunyip against Pitch Perfect Proposal. A lot of hard P's in that one. Hopefully that doesn't destroy the microphone. We go first by straight up vote, and there are 2 judges for first round matches. And I can tell you that the first vote for this first round match in the James Joyce bracket was given to Pitch Perfect Proposal. And so that means that Bunyip needs to win the next vote in order to tie it. And that is in fact what they have done. Bunyip takes the second vote with the judges, leaving us with a tie of 1-1. But we don't have ties in this contest. So in the event of a tie, the next step is to add the judges' scores together, and whatever has the highest cumulative total between the added up totals is the winner. So with the combined scores of the judges, that gave us a total of 54-51. Scoring it to the winner, Bunyip. Bunyip advances with a narrow 3-point margin onto the quarterfinals of the James Joyce bracket. They advance to face Dinner is Served in the quarterfinals. The other first round match in the James Joyce bracket saw Pandora's Campyground Therapy versus Jesus Loves the Little Children but Not So Much the Fat Ones, which is probably my favourite title of the entire contest. So I can tell you for that one, the first judge scored it a tie with the same exact score for both stories. But again, we don't do ties, even on individual judge votes, so we use our sorting method to go by categories. In the category of prompt adherence, they were both scored a 5, so we move on to overall impact or emotional resonance, where they tied again with a 3. Over to plot and structure, and again they tie on 4. Originality and creativity is again a 4 for both stories. Finally, we break the deadlock with characterization, where Pandora's Campyground Therapy takes the judge vote 4-3. So that counts as 1 vote for Pandora's Campyground Therapy. The second judge scored it to Jesus Loves the Little Children, but not so much the fat ones. Giving us another tie in the James Joyce first round with the total judge vote. So we move on to added scoring, where Jesus Loves the Little Children, but Not So Much the Fat Ones takes the win with a final score of 69-49 on the combined totals. Jesus Loves the Little Children, but Not So Much the Fat Ones advances to face Rock Damsel Scissors in the quarter-finals. Let's go to the Gertrude Stein bracket now, where there was only one quarterfinal match with Would You Love Me If I Was A versus Eliza apologizes for the lack of plot, but she's not a very good writer yet. We had 3 judges for this one. The first judge scored it for Eliza apologizes for the lack of plot, but she's not a very good writer yet. The second judge scored it for Would You Love Me If I Was A. giving the third judge the deciding vote. And they scored it for Would You Love Me If I Was A? Giving them the win 2 votes to 1. They advanced to face heated debate in the semi-finals of the Gertrude Stein bracket. Over now to the Mary Shelley bracket. In the quarter-final round, there were 3 judges for Tethered versus Resonance. And I can tell you that all 3 judges scored it for Tethered. Fact, all 3 judges actually gave Tethered the exact same score. So Tethered moves on to the semi-finals in the Mary Shelley bracket. Over now to Proof versus Inner Voices. There were 2 judges for this one, and both judges scored it for Inner Voices. Inner Voices advances to face Tethered in the semi-finals of the Mary Shelley bracket. And then we go on now to Sounds Like Teen Spirit versus Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose. The first judge scored it a tie, giving both stories the same score. So we go by category, starting with prompt adherence. And with a score of 5-4, Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose takes that vote. So that is 1-0 for Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose. And I can tell you as well that the second judge also scores it to Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose. So Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose advances on to the semi-finals, leaving us with only one more quarterfinal match in this bracket. And that is Last Rites versus Phantasmic Disruptions. And I can tell you that both judges scored it for Last Rites. And that advances to the semi-finals to take on Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose. Over now to the Charles Dickens quarterfinal. And the first match has 3 judges. And that's This Place Has No Ozone versus He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. I can tell you that the first judge scored it to This Place Has No Ozone. The second judge scored it to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And that left the deciding vote with the final judge, who scored it to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. That story advances to take on Follicle Factory in the semi-finals, with Follicle Factory getting a bye in the previous round. Then we move on to Immortality versus Peace on Earth. There's only 2 judges for this one, and I can tell you that both judges scored it for Immortality. Then we move on to a discovered and translated telling of the Day of Woe versus Beam Me Up Scruffy. The first judge scored this a tie. So we move on to our category sorting method. Prompt adherence, they both also tied, with the judge giving them both a 4. But in overall impact or emotional resonance, Day of Woe took the vote with a score of 5-4, giving them 1 judge vote. The second judge scored for Beam Me Up Scruffy, giving us a voting tie. So that means we have to move to our combined scores. And on the combined scores, Beam Me Up Scruffy advanced to face Immortality in the semi-finals with a score of 87-65. Over to the James Joyce quarterfinal now, with the first match, which is Dinner Is Served versus Bunyip, and this one has 3 judges. And I can tell you now that all 3 judges scored the contest to Bunyip. So Bunyip advances onto the semi-finals in the James Joyce bracket. The next one was Foreplay List versus Little Landon, and this also has 3 judges. I can tell you that Judge 1 scored the contest for Foreplay List. Judge 2 scored it for Little Landon, and Judge 3 scored it for Foreplay List. Foreplay List advances on to face Bunyip in the semi-finals. Then we moved on to Rock Damsel Scissors versus Jesus Loves the Little Children but Not So Much the Fat Ones. Judge 1 scored it for Jesus Loves the Little Children but Not So Much the Fat Ones. Judge 2 scores it a tie. And so we go to our category sorting method. So prompt adherence, they both tied again with 5 given by that judge. Overall impact or emotional resonance, they tied again with 4 given by that judge. Plot and structure, they again tie with 4. And it is when we get to originality and creativity that they are finally separated, with this judge scoring it 4-3 for Rock Damsel Scissors, giving them that vote. So that ties us at 1-1, with the third judge having the deciding vote. And I can tell you now that the third judge gave this contest to Rock, Damsel, Scissors. They advance on to the semi-finals in the James Joyce bracket. Then the final quarterfinal match in this bracket was Jerry the King versus Dad's Vanishing Boat. And I can tell you that all three judges scored this contest for Dad's Vanishing Boat. That will face Rock, Damsel, Scissors in the semi-finals. Back over to the Gertrude Stein bracket now, and we have 4 judges for our first semi-final match. And that is Would You Love Me If I Was A versus Heated Debate. Judge 1 scored the contest to Would You Love Me If I Was A. Judge 2 scored the contest for Heated Debate. Judge 3 scored the contest for Heated Debate. And Judge 4 scored the contest to Would You Love Me If I Was A, giving us a 2-2 tie on the judge voting. So that means we move on to adding the scores together and seeing who has the higher total. And I can tell you with a score of 108 to 100, the winner of this semi-final contest and advancing on to the finals is Heated Debate. Congratulations on making the finals. Then the other semi-final match in the Gertrude Stein bracket to see who meets Heated Debate in the finals is Pharaoh Strikes Back versus Not a Cat Burglar. There's 3 judges for this one, and I can tell you that all 3 judges scored the contest for Pharaoh Strikes Back. This is the only contest that a judging penalty was applied to in this contest, but it wouldn't have changed the results. It would have just been, instead of 3-0, it would have been 2-1, but it would have been the same result. So that makes our final for the Gertrude Stein bracket, Heated Debate versus Pharaoh Strikes Back, and we'll come back to that after we completed the other brackets. So over to the Mary Shelley semi-final now, and we have Tethered versus Inner Voices. So I can tell you now that Judge 1 scored the contest for Tethered. Judge 2 scored the contest for Inner Voices. And the third and final judge scored the contest for Tethered, giving it the win 2-1, advancing from the semi-finals to the finals of the Mary Shelley bracket. So now we go over to the other semi-final contest in the Mary Shelley bracket to see who will meet Tethered in the finals. And that semi-final match is Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose versus Last Rites. I can tell you that Judge 1 gave it to Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose. Judge 2 scored it to Last Rites. Judge 3 awarded it to Last Rites. Then the fourth and final judge gave it to Why Won't They Listen to Our Nose, giving us another 2-2 tie. So we move on to the added up totals from all the judges. And with a score of 128 to 119, the winner of this contest and advancing on to the finals to face Tethered is Last Rites. Congratulations to both stories on making the finals. Over now to the Charles Dickens bracket. And over in the Charles Dickens bracket, the first match is He's Got the Whole World in His Hands versus Follicle Factory. Judge 1 scored the contest to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Judge 2 scored it to Follicle Factory. And Judge 3 scored it a tie. So we move over to categories to sort out who is the winner on Judge 3. And there are only 3 judges on this one, so this is the deciding vote. So Judge 3 on prompt adherence scored them both a 5. On overall impact and emotional resonance, he scored them both a 3, so we're still tied. On to plot structure, and they were again both scored a 3. And when we get to originality and creativity, that is where we finally separate the 2 stories. With a score of 4-3 and advancing to the final, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And that story will face the winner of Immortality versus Beam Me Up Scruffy. Immortality versus Beam Me Up Scruffy had 4 judges, and I can tell you that the first judge scored it to Beam Me Up Scruffy. The second judge scored it to Immortality. The third judge scored it to Beam Me Up Scruffy. And the fourth judge scored it to Immortality, giving us a 2-2 tie, which means we move on to the added up score totals. And with a score of 123 to 121, the winner is Beam Me Up Scruffy on a narrow 2-point margin. They advance to the finals to face He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Congratulations to both finalists in the Charles Dickens bracket. So now we move over to the James Joyce semi-final, where we have Bunyip versus Foreplay List. Judge 1 scored the contest for Bunyip. Judge 2 scored the contest for Foreplay List. And the third and final judge scored the contest for Bunyip, giving them the win 2-1 and advancing them into the finals of the James Joyce bracket. On to the other semi-final match, and it was Rock, Damsel, Scissors versus Dad's Vanishing Boat. This one had 4 judges. Judge 1 scored the contest for Dad's Vanishing Boat. Judge 2 scored the contest for Rock, Damsel, Scissors. Judge 3 scored it a tie. And so we go to our category sorting method. On prompt adherence, they both tied with 5. On overall impact or emotional resonance, they both tied with 2. And then we actually separate them on plot and structure with a score of 4-3. Judge 3 awards it to Rock, Damsel, Scissors. So that leaves it to the fourth and final judge, who scored it to Dad's Vanishing Boat, giving us a 2-2 tie on the judge voting. So we go to our added up totals for the judge scores, and with a score of 122 to 115, Dad's Vanishing Boat advances to the finals to take on Bunyip. Congratulations to both finalists in the James Joyce bracket. And now, the time has come for our final matches. Our first final is over in the Gertrude Stein bracket, and this final was Heated Debate versus Pharaoh Strikes Back. This contest had 8 judges weighing in. I can tell you now, the scores are the following. Judge 1 scored the contest for Heated Debate. Judge 2 scored the contest for Heated Debate. Judge 3 scored the contest for Heated Debate. Judge 4 scored the contest for Pharaoh Strikes Back. Judge 5 scored the contest a tie. And by the category sorting method, on prompt adherence, they both tied at 5. And then on overall impact or emotional resonance, at a score of 4-3, that judge awarded it to Heated Debate. Judge 6 gave the contest to Heated Debate. Judge 7 scored it for Pharaoh Strikes Back. And the last and final judge gave it to Heated Debate. That means, with a score of 6 votes to 2, that Heated Debate by Nathan Mayer is the first ever announced right hook winner, taking home the €100 prize. Congratulations to Nathan Mayer, and commiserations to the author of Pharaoh Strikes Back, but you will be consolated with a free entry for a future contest. Over now to the final in the Mary Shelley bracket, where Tethered takes on Last Rites. So I can tell you that this one had 7 judges. So Judge 1 scored the contest for Tethered. Judge 2 scored the contest for Last Rites. Judge 3 scored the contest for Last Rites. Judge 4, 5, 6, and 7 all scored the contest for Tethered, meaning that Tethered takes the win with a vote of 5-2. Congratulations to the author of Tethered, named appropriately Ross Champion. He takes home his €100 prize, and the author of Last Rites gets a free entry for a future contest. Over now to the final of the Charles Dickens bracket, and that is He's Got the Whole World in His Hands versus Beam Me Up Scruffy. I can tell you for this one, Judge 1 scored it to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Judge 2 scored it a tie. So we move on to our category sorting method. On prompt adherence, they scored them both a 5. On overall impact or emotional resonance, they scored a 4-3, and that was awarded to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. That's 2 votes for He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Judge 3 scored it for He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Judge 4 scored it to Beam Me Up Scruffy, and then 5 and 6 both scored it to He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. So with a voting score of 5-1, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands by C.M. Gilbert is our winner and taking home the €100 prize in the Charles Dickens bracket. Congratulations to C.M. Gilbert And Beam Me Up Scruffy's author will be getting a consolation prize of a free entry. Now over to the final of the James Joyce bracket, which is our final. And that contest was Bunyip versus Dad's Vanishing Boat. This one had 6 judges. And I can tell you that judge number 1 scored it for Dad's Vanishing Boat. Judge number 2 scored it for Dad's Vanishing Boat. Judge number 3 scored it for Dad's Vanishing Boat. Judge number 4 scored it for Bunyip. Judge number 5 scored it for Bunyip. And judge number 6, the final judge, scored it for Bunyip, giving us a tie of 3 votes to 3. Our first final tie. So that means that we go on to the added up scores between all 6 judges to see who has the highest total. And I can tell you, with a score of 204 to 203, with a narrow 1-point margin, the winner of the James Joyce final and taking home the €100 prize is Bunyip. Congratulations to Bunyip, you are the winner. And I hope I am saying the author's name right. It is Luise. I'm going to say that as Louise, I think. So Louise Thoma, congratulations, you're taking home €100. And Dad's Vanishing Boat's author will be taking home a free entry for a future contest. So that is all the results for the inaugural Joker tournaments, the very first contest that we have run. There are more contests coming now every single week. There is one coming up this Friday, which is the 2 of Spades tournaments. That is a 500-word contest, and that is starting this Friday, January 9th. So head on over to getrighthook.com and sign up today. You can get 25% off with the promo code 2 of Spades. Congratulations to all our riders, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.